Good evening, Indiana. Welcome to the Who's Left Podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. My guest this evening, who will join me shortly, is G. David Caudill, founder and executive director at Equality Indiana, an organization dedicated to building coalitions by collaborating with federal, state, and local partners, public officials, business and religious leaders, and community activists to grow grassroots energies and build support for momentum to achieve equality and related protections in every community through local ordinances, statewide legislation, or through the courts. But mostly, the goal is to make the Hoosier State of Indiana a more welcoming place for everyone. Tonight, we'll talk about cultural and institutional support for the community, whether acceptance is secure or waning, and look at some tensions within the LGBTQ community before turning to Indiana and issues impacting Hoosiers, the Queer the Vote, Get Out the Vote program here in the state, and what is at stake right now for the queer community here in Indiana. But before we get there, you know the routine. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers, and we certainly don't have any billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 for the whole year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, forwarding content to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us. That's HOOS Left. And on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, simply at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's welcome our guest to the show, Equality Indiana founder, executive director, and president of the board. There is G. David Caudill. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me, Scott.
I am so glad we get a chance to do this. Before we get into depth here, why don't you introduce yourself to the good folks and maybe fill in any gaps that I left out when I was sort of introducing your organization.
Well, thank you very much. And again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this to talk about Equality Indiana. We're a new organization, and we're made up of two separate entities. One, 501c3, which right now its name is Equality Indiana Educational Fund, and it's just doing business as Equality Indiana. Then the other arm of the organization is a 501c4 called Equality Indiana Advocates. And the difference between a C3 and a C4, the C3 is a charitable organization. Our focus there is civic engagement and education of the population and the LGBTQIA community, as well as educating lawmakers about issues that are important to their constituents that are LGBTQIA. So that focus and people who give donations, I can understand you doing fundraising there at the beginning of your podcast, but we're a nonprofit organization and rely on donations from the community. So the 501c3 Equality Indiana, we have fundraisers to make certain that we can do the operations that I'll talk about later on. But it's a charitable contribution that people can then, when they itemize their taxes, tax season is coming up here for last year anyway, coming up on the later in April. people can get that tax deduction when they give a donation to Equality Indiana, the 501c3 entity, versus the 501c4 entity, Equality Indiana Advocates. Its focus is advocacy and lobbying the state legislature as well as other legislative bodies for equality for everyone in Indiana, particularly focused on LGBTQ equality, but it can do more engagement. Its primary activities involve sending out a questionnaire to candidates that are running on the ballot to ask them about particular issues that impact the LGBTQ community, giving those candidates and elected officials running for re-election an opportunity to share with us what they would do when they get elected to office regarding the LGBTQ community. So we send out questionnaires, they get back to us, and we then, kind of give them a thumbs up. Yes, they're going to support us, or a thumbs down. They're not going to support us. So we can take that information and educate all voters about the positions of candidates running for office coming up in the elections this year, the fall elections for the general election. So that people are better informed about their candidates to know whether the person they're voting for is going to be supportive of the LGBTQIA community. And that's a particular difference right there, that survey part, because when we Equality Indiana had applied for 501c3 status, we told them that that's one of our projects that we work on, and they says 501c3s cannot do that because that's taking a position, putting a candidate in a role that they have to take a position on a political issue. And so they said, you can't do that. A C4 has to do that. And I replied that, well, we already have a C4 and we will just wall that off. It has its own federal ID number. It has its own fundraising mechanism from the C3. It has its own bank accounts, and it does particular activities, and any activity that it puts out into, whether it's social media or that we're handing out, we make sure that is coming from the 501c4 organization versus everything else that our organization does, which is 501c3 civic engagement and voter registration and education work. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I know some other folks that are in the space, and it sounds complicated, but I understand why that these things have to sort of be separate. So let's move from the paperwork to something more exciting and perhaps an interesting way into this conversation I want to have tonight, and that's with sports. You guys, I understand, and not just you, but some other LGBTQ plus friendly organizations here in the state of Indiana are having a Pride Night with the Indiana Pacers on, I want to say, April 10th. Is that right?
Yeah, Friday, April 10th is their Pride Night. It's a Pacer organizational night that they put on, and they put out into the community. They'd like to partner with LGBTQ groups that are nonprofits, that they can turn it into a fundraiser, which is what we've done, where people buy tickets on our landing page, and a portion of that ticket proceeds come to our organization to support our 501c3 Equality Indiana. Some organizations, I think like the Indianapolis Men's Chorus, they buy a block of tickets, and so they have a limited number, and so they're people that are in the choir or people that want to support them can buy those tickets, and they all sit together and they have maybe do some photographs and things like that. And I know Indy Pride, they're doing some sort of combination of those two things where people can buy independent ones. But for our organization, people can sit where they want. We get proceeds, and we'll get our name up on the big screen. And I know that the men's chorus are singing the national anthem before the game tips off. So cool. That's a special event that's happening within an event. So it's a community night. It's LGBTQ community night, where community organizations that support the LGBTQ community can participate in supporting the Pacers and acknowledging that the Pacers are our partners when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And that's really cool. I'm glad that the Pacers do that. I'm glad that organizations like them, beyond sports, beyond basketball, do things like this to show their support visibly for the community, because it's really important, especially to have these like cultural institutions, demonstrate their support. But I guess there's some tensions in that. Let's move from celebratory to a little bit uncomfortable. I think it was yesterday or the day before even. Within the NBA, that the Chicago Bulls waived Jaden Ivey, a player who in his college days played here at Purdue. He was a star there. His mother, I believe, is the coach at Notre Dame. So a Hoosier connection to this story, and they cut him because of disparaging remarks he made toward the LGBTQ community, because of disparaging remarks he made around Pride Night, and things he said about Catholics and other. Dude's gone off the deep end. He's got some problems I think he might need to address. But that made me think there were some tensions in similar lines with the NHL in the last couple years, and they used to do these big Pride nights, and the players would wear special jerseys on the ice, and they got pushback, I think, from a lot of the players there, particularly some of the Russian Orthodox guys. There's a lot of Russians play in the NHL, and so they sort of quit doing that, and I guess I wonder how you describe that tension, how it makes you feel, maybe makes some other folks in the community feel, where like, yeah, the organization will put this happy rainbow face on this thing, but like, maybe the players in the locker room aren't exactly friendly to the cause. Maybe the owners themselves aren't super friendly to the cause. How do you juggle those things?
Well, of course, I understand it all from, a business perspective. Businesses have to do the best to sell a product. And in this instance with Jaden Ivey, since the NBA has allowed their players to be on the forefront of social issues, and the WNBA does this as well. They allow players, they give the optional participation. It's one way I looked it up in doing some research for in the professional sports arena, where players are given the option to participate. But if they take the exact opposite approach, which is going after some of these cultural nights, or and it sounds like he kind of went off the deep end, and maybe he has possibly. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but Jaden maybe needs a little counseling. But has to understand that their audience is a diverse audience, and that's why I think the NBA has taken the approach. And NHL, I know you mentioned that, and again, they have a market where it's obvious that NHL is their fan base is less diverse. Their players are less diverse, especially when it comes to skin color, versus the NBA is more diverse. Professional football is more diverse versus the NHL. Baseball is more diverse versus again NHL. NHL has a unique niche of players that are just less diverse. Not that there aren't good players. It's just, it's the way things have worked out in that area. And so their fan base is probably less diverse as well. And so they had to make business decisions. And I know the NHL's decision that they made a few years ago, they tried to draw the line between what's appropriate activities to acknowledge on the ice versus off the ice is how I read their restriction policy of 2023 and 24, because they had Pride nights where players were asked to put tape on their hockey sticks and stuff like that, and there were some players that didn't want to acknowledge that they wanted to participate, so they allowed for the participation to be players didn't do anything on the ice. I read somewhere though that they backed away on during practice when they're out there practicing on the ice that they can have a stick that has rainbow tape on it, but that's the most that they budged on the ice during warmups, but not during playing the game. So they were trying to draw a fine line so that the players weren't required to participate, and versus what the NBA tried to do, which is optional participation unless a player goes off the deep end and attacks, everything that's contrary to what the NBA is about, which is inclusive, about being a diverse league, about having diverse voices. But to attack all those voices, I think that's probably what got Mr. Ivey in some trouble. And maybe he'll get some sensitivity training, and maybe he'll be back. But it's hard to say about his future. But those differences, I think, are important because of just the way the culture of those two separate sports leagues have evolved. I hope you would agree with that.
Yeah, well, yes, but then I wonder, sort of tying this to the broader culture at large. And you mentioned that, these are businesses; they have a certain prerogative that their goal is to make money, and you'd think they would want to cast as wide a tent as they can and show that they support everybody, and that way. But as the culture has shifted, rightward, I think over the last couple of years, pressure from the administration certainly hasn't helped. You see not just the NHL as one of these cultural institutions that has maybe pulled back a little bit on their support for the community. If you look at something like Target a few years ago and how they were all in, Pride Month, June, they always had all the merch. Then they started to get some pushback from certain sectors, and they were like, you know what, just never mind, we're not going to do it. And I wonder if that is a sign of something happening more broadly in the culture. Like, have we reached kind of peak equality and we're slipping away from
it? I believe I don't think it's reached its peak. At least I hope it hasn't. But I think organizations like Target, which they're again trying to make money. You can't please all the people all the time, though businesses keep trying. They sometimes you got to take to be able to take a few steps forward. You got to take a few steps back. We don't know what the Pride year is going to be this year. See, I've got already a little bit of Pride stuff I wear all the time. This is for Indiana University, and hopefully they haven't taken steps back, and maybe they'll have some new Pride T-shirts this year come June. But again, because of the political pressures, certainly they are felt from what's happening either in this state of Indiana, impacting a university that's public university in this state, or a multinational corporation, or at least like Target, that's trying to sell all their products to all of the people. Feeling political pressure from a current administration that sends out an evil tweet or whatever he does on his social media to cause trouble and to cause consternation, goes through our economy and ends up into a boardroom of a company like Target to say, okay, well, let's just avoid that by just completely not selling anything that has a rainbow come May and June. Maybe it was a good decision, maybe it isn't. If their stock remains where it is, they're trying to also, they have an audience of stockholders, not just people buying stuff, but stockholders. And so I think in the business community, though, from an LGBTQ perspective, we'd like for businesses like that to 365 be supporting LGBTQ individuals, because we're not only stockholders, we are customers, we work there, we, like I said, we own stock, we are maybe even in the boardroom. And we feel that if they're going to put their lobbying power to work, they should put it to work for all of those people, their customers, their board members, their stockholders, and the people that work for them, and support equal rights for everybody. And one way they can prove that they're doing that is through political contributions, but also by selling merchandise to those customers and employees who would like to shop there and get their pride on with pride merchandise. It's a business decision, and in the LGBTQ community, sometimes we have a list of places that you support. You don't go to those places, or places that you don't support and places that you do support, and they change sometimes year to year. And in Target used to be on the good list. Well, I think they're on the bad list, and they went to the good list. Now they're back on the bad list. So, and some people in our community, they don't care about those lists. They just want to go. They got the best price at Target, and they're going to go there regardless of whether they're on the good list or bad list. And that's where, being an activist in the LGBTQ community, we want to reach out to as many people as possible and say, hey, if we really want to change our trajectory, supporting those businesses that support us. And this gets back to even the sports thing. The Pacers support them because they support us. They're willing to have one night that they say it's LGBTQ community night, so we should support them. Now, also the Indy Fuel, they had a Pride night as well this year that Indy Pride participated in. It was at the end of February. The Indianapolis Indians, they're having a Pride night in conjunction with Indy Pride. The WNBA, our Fever, they'll have a Pride night as well that we hope to be a participant with as well. So again, we should be supporting businesses that will say they support us all the time. The goal of Equality Indiana is to try to prevent local businesses, the big businesses here, and I'm not going to call out anybody, Lilly, to stop giving to organizations like the Indiana Chamber of Commerce that then supports the extremist candidates that are passing these laws that are doing harm to the LGBTQ community. We would prefer them not to give that money there and not just show up on Pride weekend to say, hey, we're all about Pride for our employees, but then turn around and adjust their political contributions and be more selective and give to those candidates or at least organizations that are going to support what they're cheering about on Pride weekend, that is going to support not just those people on those days, but support them every day of the year.
Yeah, and that's I think the thing I worry about is that the whole support for Pride, the Pride nights with the NBA, with the NHL, with the merchandise at Target, it was always just like a cynical business decision and not a genuine commitment to equality. And I think I can't help but think about the parallels between now and Germany in the 1930s, because my God, look at the news every day. But I think about the Weimar Republic and late 20s, early 30s Berlin, and how accepting and open it was, and how the LGBTQ community then was able to live openly. And you thought, man, things are going pretty well, and then just a couple years later, beyond backsliding, right? And I worry that can something like that happen here?
It's always, unfortunately, possible. Those that don't learn from history will have history repeat itself, and those lessons from that period of time of world history, and then also in countries like Germany, but we also had here in the United States we still tiptoe on that line of ostracizing people who are our neighbors because they have been because of rhetoric teaching you to be fearful of those people that may be your neighbors. I mean, the orange guy that is the showman in the White House right now, everything he talked about in his campaign, even though you didn't hear, even though I tried not to listen to it, because I knew it was the same old rhetoric, was about going after, immigrants. They told everybody, you elect me, and we're going to get rid of all these terrible immigrants that are breaking the law. But instead, they come in and they're trying to round up everybody, including U.S. citizens, and not just deporting people who are, the lawbreakers, that those that are here making a living, supporting our economy by living here, even though they may not be documented. They'd like to be documented. They'd like to be American citizens. That process is screwed up, though, and they're not doing anything to fix that. But my point is that the rhetoric says one thing, and then they turn around and do god awful things to a bunch of people, and the history on that could be repeated for the LGBTQ community by starting off with saying, okay, the people who are most different, the trans community, folks that are transgender, they're really not real people. Once they're able to dehumanize people like that, it makes it easier for them to then go after the whole community. And we don't want them to go after the trans community, so we're going to stand arm in arm with the trans community. That's what this flag behind me is about. This is the transgender flag, and it's the Indiana flag symbol transposed on it. So Indiana transgender folks, on this day of International Transgender Day of Visibility, we're going to stand arm in arm with the transgender community, our organization and myself, as well as the board of directors, and we're working to make sure that those communities are protected. So going back to the beginning part of this conversation about businesses, we would prefer businesses to not just show up one day a year. We would like for them to show up not only in their policies, but supporting the policies that are being passed in the legislature, to support candidates that will support, their employees, their customers who are LGBTQ, and do so every single day. And that's our goal, to make Indiana a welcoming state for everyone. And I think businesses have a responsibility to do that, especially in a capitalist society, capitalist economy that we have. Businesses play an important role, whether it's business in the sports business, like Target, that are selling things, or, even, like I said, Eli Lilly, who is selling drugs that hopefully, make us a healthier society and live longer.
I'm glad you brought up the trans community, especially on this International Trans Day of Visibility. And I meant to ask what you think of. You mentioned this othering, right? And they're always looking for a wedge to divide people and divide communities, whether it's immigrants, whether it's the gay community, whether there's fascism, authoritarianism always needs an other, always needs an enemy. And the trans community has sort of become the enemy du jour over the last couple of years. And like, what do you make of? I mean, obviously, your organization, you're saying, we support our trans friends 100%. But what do you make of this movement? And it might be more prominent in the UK than it is here in the US, but it's LGB without the T. Like, they're trying to split the queer community. And what do you make of that? What do you make of folks like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a gay man, going in and working in the Trump administration, working along with raging Christian nationalists who probably would say he's going to hell? What do you make of somebody like Barry Weiss, the editor-in-chief at CBS News now, who goes out there and sells a hateful message every day, doing the work of MAGA? What do you make of folks like that? What do you make of that movement?
I'd only heard of it, I think I'm not sure what setting, and it may have been an NPR story, and it was about the movement being primarily over in Great Britain. And so I did a little research ahead of time on it, and um, it it's obvious, at least on the surface, it's mainly a social media phenomenon,
Mm.
and not, I don't know if it's really an actual movement, but uh, on social media, it's easier for people to disguise their true identity. So it's something that uh, it seems to undermine movement like Equality Indiana, because we are an equality movement, that we're fighting for equality for everyone, not just LGBTQIA, but everyone, including people who are consider themselves cisgender and are straight. Um, so it undermines the coalition and the inclusion that we are fighting for by saying, let's take one of those letters out, let's take a group of people out, uh, and excluding transgender people, because they actually face the highest level of discrimination and actual violence against them. I feel, all my transgender siblings, they're very brave for being uh, authentic to themselves, and I I want to lift them up in a safe way, and they need safe spaces for them to be in, which is kind of one of the slogans of Equality Indiana. When we talk about our Queer the Vote Indiana, we feel the voting booth should be a safe space for everyone, including transgendered individuals. They should be able to get registered to vote and vote. But a lot of this movement is being amplified or supported by anti-LGBTQ individuals in the community that are trying to, break up our coalition, because no throughout history, the fight for equal rights, whether it was for women to gain the right to vote back in, the in 1919, I think it was, 1911. I forget when that was. History is escaping me, but they stayed together. It took a long time for women to get the right to vote, but that equality movement stayed together. The women's movement fractured in the 70s, 1970s, because they didn't stay together. Um, Black Americans to get their civil rights and their rights to vote to be enforced by the federal government. Um, it took them staying together. And so our community and the transgender individuals and those that consider themselves intersex, transgender, bisexual, lesbian, gay, all of us, we need to stay together, because that's history has shown that's how we can be successful at gaining um, those equal rights that we so badly need.
First they came for, right? Like they pose like, oh, listen, we're friends of the gay community, just not those trans, right? But they always come for you next, don't they? Um,
Yeah,
which I guess
absolutely.
is like why I wonder about folks like Besant and the log cabin Republicans, for example. Like, what is you doing, baby?
Right. Well, there is a segment of openly, gay men who are self-loathing. They may talk about being gay, but uh, they, either the way they were raised or the way they were programmed, they really don't like that part of themselves being public. And you mix in a little narcissism with that as well, and you suddenly have somebody who's um, um, yeah, they'll say they're gay so they can be, so the people that they're trying to help and protect and promote, um, they can then say, yes, here's my gay friend, I am a diverse person, I do embrace diversity, um, gay people love me. And these are things we've heard from, the
I think
the guy
Trump
in
was
the
just
White
talking
House.
about it last week.
And
Yeah.
there's no scientific, right? There's absolutely, I mean, evidence, real evidence. Of course, we know he doesn't embrace science. It doesn't embrace real evidence. But in the last election, I think I saw numbers in exit polls that only 12% of the LGBTQ population voted for him. Um, so that's close to 90% did not. And from the friends that I know and I hang out with, that would be accurate. I don't know if I know many gay, lesbian, transgender folks that if they voted, that's the part that we're trying to break, is the voter apathy that's out there, that people, especially queer people, feel it's not going to make a difference because the same people are going to be, doing the same things, whether it's in the White House, whether it's in Congress, or whether it's in the State House. And our argument is we can definitely make a difference in the State House if we stay together, get registered, and get out to vote. So those are but going back to, these guys, Scott Bassett, it's great that we can say we have a gay guy running the Treasury, but I'm sure he's not showing up to HRC fundraisers to, support their causes, because he's not on he may be in one area on the same team that me, but he's not on my team.
Yeah. I'm glad you sort of brought us to electoral politics in that last statement, and overcoming the voter apathy, and part of that is, I think, wondering who you can trust, right? I think about listen, we were talking about the NBA and the NHL and Target and sort of performative equality and performative acceptance, and then I would want to look at on the electoral angle of that same sort of thing. Just recently, we saw California Governor Gavin Newsom sort of pull back in the same way as those businesses did when he was talking about Democrats needing to be more, quote unquote, culturally normal, right? And he said, I think he may have gotten too far out ahead on things like marriage equality and trans rights. And I guess from the outside looking in, I can see why some folks within the community would be like, well, listen, if this guy is sort of one of the faces of the Democratic Party, who can I really trust if he's willing to throw us under the bus first thing when he looking to run for national office,
Right. And in the putting on my political hat, it seemed like when I read about that and heard a few stories about that, he tried to clarify afterwards, and maybe this is the truth, that he's talking, internally for the Democratic Party. Why did we lose the last national election? What strategically could we be doing differently? And I believe when he tossed out that term, culturally normal, it definitely would get him in hot water with progressives, with the LGBTQ community, because there's not a binary state of normal and abnormal, and that solidifies that in the way we function as a culture. We're like all other things. It's not binary. It's a spectrum. And yeah, getting himself in hot water by tossing that out there. And yes, he may be a candidate for president in the next cycle. There's a lot of candidates that could be out there, and he's sticking his toe in the water, and maybe the water's gonna be a shark and bite his toe off because of putting that out. I think maybe he's singing a different tone, and strategically those are the wrong words that he should have been putting out there. I know Pete Buttigieg said something not the same, but something similar that got him in trouble with transgender. I can't think of what it was, and I probably should have looked it up before I dove into that. But he is a gay man, and you would think he'd have 100% support from the LGBTQ community. But if I recall, he said something that got him in a little bit of hot water because it was something in the same vein that Gavin Newsom said as well. And he had to clarify it later to say, no, what I was really meaning was this. And I think they're just trying to bounce words off, believing that that Democrats are too culturally dug in certain areas, and we should be. It's just we have to be better at our messaging. The other side is good at demonizing the messages or the culture of Democrats. Like I said, putting on political hats. Even though Equality Indiana is a nonpartisan organization, I've worked in partisan politics before. I've worked for candidates, helping them raise money, helping them message their campaigns, and its messaging has been the problem with the Democratic Party for decades upon decades, since I was a child, going back to Jimmy Carter when he was running for re-election that first time. The messaging ever since then, I think even before that, I mean, Democrats have really struggled. The aberration, the couple of times that we broke through were this bumper sticker, it's the economy, stupid, Bill Clinton, or hope, Barack Obama. But in between there, we have lost the ability to our big tent to be able to fall under a good message. Hope, encapsulated that. It's the economy, stupid. Again, big tent. I'm trying to make a big tent over my head. But that's what for Democrats to do, they have to do. And I think both Gavin Newsom and Pete were trying to put out some words that can help capture that big tent, and they were lead balloons instead, and they fell flat, and they needed to backtrack and say, no, what I really meant, because they know either one, if they're going to be successful in Democratic politics to win the primary in 28 and then to win the presidential race against whoever the other side's putting up, it has to include LGBTQ people in this country. And so they don't, as I'm trying to, not me, but my organization here, Equality Indiana, is trying to do with LGBTQ voters, get them better educated so that they're more sophisticated when it comes to voting, that they're not just voting for a particular party, they're voting for that party because that party does support and share our values, versus the other party right now in this point in time does not.
I'm glad you brought that there. And, just to mention, like, the messaging, I think sort of gets at what you're throwing out there right now. The criticism, I think, from a lot of folks of the Democratic Party is that they're just messaging and don't actually stand for something. So how do you know, like, how does your organization figure out, when you're educating folks in the community, around voting issues, who you can trust, who will actually support you, who is actually going to fight for you in office, or who is just messaging?
Well, I mean, maybe I wasn't clear in saying that. I think Democrats in the state of Indiana and then nationally, they do have values. They do stand for things. It's getting that message out they've just been bad at messaging, just like the way I'm talking right now is how Democrats sometimes sound. They're not able to message well. They're not able to put it on a good bumper sticker. And that's what the other side has been doing well for, like I said, the last 40, 50 years. So Democrats, they do stand for things, but because it's so complex, a lot of Democrats, when they're talking at a town hall, it's like that. They say too many words. They need to reduce the amount of words they're saying and put it into a easier message for ordinary voters to be able to digest what they stand for. And they just have not been able to do that on the national level in many of the last presidential elections, or even congressional elections. Now, this is my opinion. Some people can argue with me, and I'm happy to debate that. But just take the Indiana Democratic Party. It's been a complete failure since the last statewide election that they really won, which was when Frank O'Bannon was elected governor in 2000. Yeah, in 2000. That was that year. We've had a few statewides that have won since then, but they have been individual candidates that have done a good job, and normally it's because the other side fell flat like when Joe Donnelly was elected U.S. senators, because Murdoch shot himself in the foot, the leg, the face every time he couldn't put that statement about God wanting women to be, have children if they have a child because they were, sexually assaulted. It's just he kept putting his feet in his mouth and shooting himself in the foot and then sticking it in his mouth. So those were individual cases, but the state party itself has really just struggled, which is why I don't associate with the state party anymore. I don't associate with the Stonewall Democrats because they're an arm of the state party. Every time I've asked them, well, if I become a member, what is my money going to go for? They can't answer that question for me, and that worries me when they are taking money from you for a political party, but they can't tell you, is this money going into operations? Is it going into getting out voters? They can't tell me. And so I'm not going to give them money and be a member. And I think our whole state party structure is set up that way, that people really don't know if they donate what their money is going for. And that's a messaging problem because it is going someplace. And it's probably something that I may believe in, but if you can't put it into words, you're not messaging very well. So if anybody from the Indiana Democratic Party is listening to this or hears this, please do better at messaging to people who do support the values of the Democratic Party, but I'm never going to give a donation to the state party until they can tell me what the money's going for. I'll give it directly to candidates, and I've told candidates that, but I won't give it to anything that's associated with the state party. And I'm a diehard Democrat. I've run for office as a Democrat. My bona fides as being a Democrat are unquestionable. I've worked to get Democrats elected as governor, as to Congress throughout the country. I've raised $16 million to get a governor elected in Missouri that was a Democrat, and that's not a blue state. And this was back in 2008, but it still was not an easy election. So I wish the overall national party, like I said, would do better at messaging. I think they do stand for things. And I think Democrats do stand for things. They just do a crappy job, and they have for the last, except for those, Bill Clinton years and Obama years when they first got elected, they had great messaging. And then, Republicans threw terrible candidates at them for their reelect, so they were able to get reelected. They didn't quite have the same messaging, but it's hard to take out an incumbent on a presidential level. So I don't know where our conversation started, and I've kind of gone off into my whole political background. So bring me back to home here.
Let's bring it back because let's stay on electoral politics though, because we are in an election year. Let's talk about Queer the Vote.
Absolutely. Queer the Vote Indiana is our Get Out the Vote campaign. We have on our website, people can sign up and take a pledge that they are going to vote and encourage other people to vote. And that pledge also is a pledge that our organization is making to educate them, anybody they get signed up, and anyone interested in voting, that we're going to keep them informed about when early voting is, where they can find information about the candidates, where they can find the location to vote. Because we're targeting younger people who've never voted before. They may be those 18, 19, 20, those college age, or even up until their 30s, and they've never voted in their life. They never had anybody ask them to vote. We have a way for people to register to vote on our website because we have a partnership with vote.org, which is a national nonpartisan voter engagement organization that when people go to our landing page and they put in their name and address and their email and optional for the phone number, but all that information, and they click go, not only do they send that information to the state of Indiana, the Secretary of State's office, which then gets it to their county clerk, that information is also collected by vote.org, and we gain access to that. So we can start talking and develop a relationship and engage with that person. Say, hey, thanks for registering vote with Equality Indiana. We want to let you know that you did so before the deadline. If you know any other people, please forward this to them so they can register. But here's a resource. Remember, like for this primary, we sent out an email recently that said it's a closed primary, which means you're going to be asked to whether you want a Democrat ballot or do you want a Republican ballot? You can't vote for both Democrats or Republicans. If you're an independent and you go in there and ask for an independents select their candidates in a whole different fashion. Normally they just have to get signatures and they're on the ballot, or they have a convention like the Libertarian Party. They have a convention and that's how they decide there. But our primaries are set up for Democrats and Republicans for them to select their general election candidates. So you're going to be asked that. So for new voters, they may not know that. We want to make sure we educate them at that so they know what to expect. When it gets to early voting, we're going to remind people, hey, Marion County, your early voting starts here. And different counties start, because we work throughout the state, have early voting periods at different points. It starts and ends right before Election Day, of course. But we want to make sure we get that information out and encourage them to vote early, because you never know what's going to happen on Election Day. You get up, get a flat tire, and you can't go to work or do anything because you don't have public transit in your community. So if you vote early, you get it out of the way, you've checked it off the list. So we do a big push on early voting, but that's part of our Queer the Vote campaign, is to make sure people who we've signed up to register to vote, people who we've talked to at events, that get signed up and take the pledge to Queer the Vote, that we're engaging with them to remind them about voting when it's upon us to do it. Nerds like me and maybe like you, we are thinking about elections all the time, but the average Hoosier out there, they're not thinking about it until they're right upon it, especially young people. They only think about things 5 seconds before it happens, which is why a lot of young people don't vote in Indiana, because we have a 28-day cutoff before you have to be registered to vote. If they don't start hearing about election time until the day before the election and they didn't get registered 27 days ago, they can't vote. Because they're not automatically voted. So the whole registration thing, we'll be pushing that for the next week, because a week from yesterday, 6 days now, there is to get registered. Midnight on the 6th of April is people can still fill out the registration form online and they still technically be registered to vote in the primary if they want to. And then when we get past the primary and we get to May 19th, registration reopens, and we're going to be pressing at all the Pride festivals, which I hope to talk to here in a moment. But we're going to be going to Pride festivals to get people signed up to Queer the Vote, get people signed up to vote, get them in our system so we can start that little dance of engagement between June going all the way up to October, when early voting will start, and then get them out to vote. So it's a pledge, but it's also an empowerment statement. We're going to queer the vote. We're going to make sure those that are our allies, those that are in the queer community, LGBTQIA, that if we come together and we vote as a coalition for the candidates that, we're going to put forth, the answers to those questionnaires of the candidates that say, yes, we'll support marriage equality in Indiana, versus those that ignore us, or those that are elected officials that are extremists that have put forth the ban on trans kids playing sports or the ban on gender affirming care. We will note those candidates as thumbs down. Do you want to vote for the thumbs down people or the thumbs up person? And hopefully with that education, they go and make the right decision. And maybe, just maybe, we can elect more candidates that will not be putting forth legislation that will harm our communities, but will empower our community to be a part of the state and welcomed in our state as everyone should be, if we're really going to get back to the real values of what Hoosier hospitality is about. Right now, people are excluded from that Hoosier hospitality. We want Indiana to get back to the values of welcoming everyone to Indiana, including people in the transgender community, people who are LGBTQ.
Our good friend Derek Holder asked me to make sure to ask you how a small segment of the population, the LGBTQ plus community, can affect change in an election. But I think you just said it. Everybody's got to vote. If you look at the evangelical community, for example, not nearly as big of a percentage of the population as you would think, but they all vote.
Absolutely, yes. They faith-based organizations have been doing this for years, of getting people together, getting them on the same page with voting, making sure they're registered, and getting them out to vote for the candidates that agree with their values. And so that's what we're trying to duplicate. It's just a little bit more difficult because our communities, even though we're not getting everybody together on a Sunday, morning or afternoon, I'm not a religious person, so I don't know what they do in evangelical churches, but we're not getting everybody together on a weekly basis to be able to say that. So we have to show up in their community, in their space during Pride events. And by the way, there's more than 50 Pride events that happen in the state of Indiana, starting at the end of May, going all the way until October. And we hope to be at all of them this year. We were at most of them in 24. We were at most of them in 23. Last year, less so because it wasn't an election year going on. And there were some, personal challenges for some of our board members that couldn't make it. But we hope to do that this year to, again, meet people in their space to say voting, like I said, voting together is a safe space. And another thing, our Queer the Vote Indiana campaign and get out the vote effort, we're hoping to include this year. We've talked about this in the past, but our board members really going to work on it, that during early voting, we hope to have get out the vote rallies. Like on a Saturday morning, we get together at a donut place in downtown Indy or in Muncie or in Bloomington and have a drag queen there, get together, have a good time with the drag queen saying, yeah. We look at her go. And then she's going to say, we're all going to go down and vote together. So we all early vote together on that Saturday, get it checked off our list. And hey, by the way, come back next Saturday. You don't get to vote again, but bring 5 people and we're going to have another good time, have some coffee, have some donuts, then I'll go down and vote again. And keep building that momentum, because when you vote as a community, I think it just feels safer to be coming with friends and people that you know and people who aren't going to look at you funny, especially for our transgender Hoosiers. Like I said, I mentioned about them being, courageous and brave, just being themselves as they are, but then having to show up to vote. And maybe their ID, of course, now can't get changed because we have bullies and creeps in our that are elected state governor and attorney general that aren't letting people change those documents to where they have to show their ID. Well, if they walk with us on a Queer the Vote rally that we're having, they'll be showing up with friends and neighbors, and I'm happy to stand there and let them know, let these clerks know that these people, they have the right to vote, and they're gonna, if you're not gonna let them vote today, do a provisional ballot, and I'll walk with them. We'll go after the election and make sure that provisional ballot is counted, because they're entitled to due process, and everyone has the right to vote. Where the challenge is that the extremists that are in our legislature are trying to turn it into a privilege. And that's just not what our Constitution says. I always have my U.S. Constitution with me, and I like to challenge people to challenge me on what it says in the Constitution, and I can get to it really quick. But everyone has a constitutional right to vote, including transgendered individuals, transgendered Hoosiers, and I'll fight to make sure that they get their right to vote. And hopefully we can elect better representatives so that they can make it more easier for IDs to be obtained for everyone to reflect their true selves.
Very good. So just a couple minutes left here. So folks in the community, allies, how can we learn more about Equality Indiana? How can we help you throughout this election season get out the vote?
Sure. EqualityIndiana.org. And by the way, Derek, good friend, I appreciate him reaching out and putting me on the spot to, yes, small communities can help us through not only the Pride festivals, but going to EqualityIndiana.org. We are a .org as a nonprofit. Can sign up to be a volunteer. We're always recruiting volunteers to not only attend events like Pride festivals, but volunteers to work on some of our working committees, whether it's our Get Out the Vote effort, doing Queer the Vote activities in their community, or helping us. One of the programs we're working on now is college IDs, because our wonderful state legislature has said that college students can't use the ID given to them, even if they're going to a public university like IU or Purdue. They have to get a state ID. So we are working with LGBTQ centers and LGBTQ clubs at colleges to try to make sure they have all the documentation. And if we have to go there as board members from my organization to drive them to the B&B so they can get that ID so they can vote, we want to make sure college students get to exercise their right to vote in Indiana if they choose to come here and go to school here and want to vote here. If they want to vote back where they are, where they live, with their parents, we'll make sure, they get their absentee ballot filled out. But if they want to vote in Indiana, we're setting up a program so we can communicate particularly with those LGBTQ voters. We hope to expand that by the time we get to 28 to all of college campuses and working with other groups and organizations. But you can support those activities, our Queer the Vote Indiana activities, by going to equalityindiana.org. Right now, we have our Hoosier Hysteria Pride Flag fundraising campaign going on, where this is one of the pride flags that you can get. We have 6 different pride flags that if you donate $100 in one-time gift or more, or if you sign up to become a $10 a month donor, we'll give you the choice of 6 different pride flags. And you can see them all at equalityindiana.org. We'll give you the choice of a pride flag. And if you take care of this campaign now and you get a pride flag, you'll have your pride flag sent to you before Pride Month, so you can show your neighbors, show your community, show the businesses, if you get it for your business, that not only do you support queer folks in your community and throughout the state, but that those people who are LGBTQ know your house, your business, wherever, is a safe space for them to be themselves at.
I love it. Well, we aim to provide a safe virtual space here. We hope we're doing a good job. It's been an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Stick around for a second. I'm going to send you backstage, say goodbye, end the stream, but don't go anywhere. I want to make sure I get a chance to thank you again and say goodbye to you before we sign off for the night. All right. Thank you, David. All right. Once again, that was David Caudill, the executive director, president of the board, and founder of Equality Indiana. Once again, you can help them at equalityindiana.org. And hey, please help us at progressiveindiana.net. We could use a paid subscription if you're able. Again, only $5 a month, $50 for the whole year. This independent media project relies solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Again, that's at progressiveindiana.net. We could also really use a follow on social media at Progressive Indiana Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle. Over on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. You can find me on most social media sites at HoosLeft. That's HOOS Left. Send me a direct message anywhere with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me directly at scott@whosleft.us. Finally, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on too. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left Podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.